All right, for those of you that were able to open these files, do you want to try one of the other ones? How many people were able to download the stuff from my Dropbox site? So, some of you, some of them, okay. So if you did, then the simple document one that I had out there is pretty much identical to what we just did, but the one that was, let's see, I'll pull up the, so the Dropbox, the one here that says simple.doc RMD. And by the way, all of these are RMD files, which is this that I said earlier, the R Markdown. So that's what we're doing. Whether it's a presentation or a document, they're still all in this R Markdown format. All right, so if you have that one, go ahead and open it. And that should look like this. The one that just says simple doc, D-O-C. And for the most part, I kind of left in what was there from the initial default document that gets created. But I wanted you guys to see. So I've glossed over this a little bit. In the newer version of R, it goes ahead and does some setup stuff at the beginning. And so what it's actually doing is it's calling knitr and saying, okay, I want to set all of the chunk options by default to echo to the screen. So I just wanted you guys to know what that piece of code is. So right now, the way this document is set up that I put together, it's actually saying, unless you tell me otherwise, show me all the code. It's easy enough that if you were writing a real document, you might just as easily change that to false. I'm going to leave it for right now the way I had it, but I just want you to understand what that means. And I just called it setup. Don't worry about the include equals false piece for right now. The rest of this is like what we had before. We had the summary. This time I've left in the pressure of the plot data set. Oh, one other thing to show you. There's a little piece here that kind of looks like an R code chunk, but it turns out you can do I don't know if that's not how you spell literal. How do you spell literal? L-I? Is it? There's not like two T's or two R's. All right. I can't spell on the fly to save my life. But if you have these little back tick marks, so 3 of them together with a little R and 3 of them there, that's a code chunk. If you have the back ticks without any R, without writing that letter, what it does is it's basically writing this to the screen as it would look if you typed a command. So it's going to probably show up in what's called proportional. Basically like if you used Courier. So Times Roman is a proportional font, Courier isn't. And that's basically what it's doing, is it's gonna write the word echo space equals space false, and it'll look just like you were typing a command. So sometimes it's kind of handy. This is another way to sort of highlight a piece of text, and this is often done for little pieces of code where you want somebody to look at the code as if you were typing it. It's not running the code, it's putting it out to the screen so people understand, oh, this is a piece of code that I would type. So that's what that means. I gave it a header here, and I'm running a linear model. So the next workshop in April, I'm going to teach you guys a little bit more about what this is, but just for right now, so you guys know, this is calling the linear model function. I'm basically running a regression for miles per gallon against horsepower and weight, and it's pulling the data from a slightly different CARS data set, one called MT CARS, which stands for Motor Trends Car data set. And if you're interested in that data set, in the help window, if I type MT CARS, it'll come back and give me information about that data set. And this data set has a little bit more, oh, it's even older than I thought, 1974 motor trend. It has stuff on fuel consumption, so you can imagine what the miles per gallon look like, right, from 1974. And other aspects of automobile design. So it has 11 variables, things like miles per gallon, number of cylinders, cubic displacement of the engine, and so forth. So there's a bunch of these different data set, or built-in data sets that are handy, especially for teaching and for testing code. So that's another thing I like about this. So it's gonna run that regression model, and it'll give me the output. And then now that I've run that model, I actually have some things that I could do to look at the different pieces. So we did a little bit with ggplot, and I'll do more with that in future sessions, but this is basically calling that library. So inside of here, I'm actually on the fly loading a library that I need. So you guys kind of remember doing that in the first 1 or 2 workshops? Yes, no, sort of. Okay, so it's basically saying make sure that you've got ggplot loaded so that you can call these functions. And so it's using the ggplot thing here to make another kind of plot. I can look at an excerpt of the MT-CARS data set. So before we run that, I want you guys to see what this data set looks like. If I just type in MT-CARS in the console window, and I've got mine kind of blown up, so it gets a little hard to see. So let me try this one more time. Let's see if it'll... Pardon? Oh, the one that was simpledoc.rmd. But just for right now, just so you guys can see it, down here in the console window, if you just type in MT-CARS, now you can kind of see what this data set looks like. And so everything over here, it tells you which car, and then there's all the variables and the pieces of information. So, so there's a decent number of cars in here. Anybody in here want to confess to owning one of these back in 74? Yeah, I know. Anybody in here even remember the Datsun brand? My dad had a Datsun for a while. Okay. A Valiant Duster. Wow, man, these are huge land yacht cars. My husband had a Mercury. I need to ask him which he had a Mercury when he was in high school. God, I'm dating myself. Okay. So this next command here, so even though we're knitting the document, if I want to use commands from the knitter package, then I need to call them. One of the cool commands that's built into knitter is one called cable. So it's the knitting way to make a table. So cable will actually take the head of this data set. So this is excuse me, the R command. So I'm actually going to type this down here so you guys can see it. So, and I sort of introduced this, and I can't remember now if I did it Workshop 1 or Workshop 2, but the command head basically says, show me the first part of the data set. And if you don't have 10,000 columns, this actually works out pretty well. And it'll usually only show you the first 5 to 6 rows, or first 5 to 6 cases in your data set. So what it's going to do is it's actually going to take this output and make it into a nice table. And so there's a whole bunch of other options, and I won't have time to explain all of these in depth today. But basically what I'm doing is saying, take this piece of information, make it into a table. Everything in here that's a number, we're going to show it with 2 significant digits, and then I can play with the alignment. So this example, and I can't remember if it's on, let's see if I type in cable. I'm trying to remember where I pulled this. Okay, it's actually not from the help menu here. I'm going to show you a couple of other very useful websites because tables get challenging. So if I type in knitter and tables, let's see, yeah, not the very first link. There's actually another thing out here called the printer package, which I'm not going to talk about today, but Carl Broman has an awesome website for understanding how to do some of this stuff. The other one that I encourage you guys, actually all three of these, this one that says Fast Track Publishing Using Knitter Table Mania, and Introduction to Knitter by Michael Sachs. So the Carl Broman website, he has some stuff here in the beginning about figures, and I'll get to figures in a minute. But like here's an example of doing this, and if you wanted to run a linear regression, you can use cable to look at the coefficients, and then if you click here, it'll say, here's what that table looks like. There are other ways to make tables that I'm not going to get through in this session today. You can actually use the Pander package. There's another one called Xtable. But the examples that I've got today just are using this cable command. The Fast Track Publishing website here, I like the picture of this building, of the turning torso in Malamo. Anybody ever been there? I don't know where Malamo is. It's in Sweden. It's what?
It's across the bridge from Copenhagen.
Oh, cool. Okay. Now he does a bunch of complicated stuff here with different kinds of tables, and I'm not going to go through the code on this website, but just to show you what's possible, and this is where I'm headed in terms of being able to get templates working so that I can hand it to Erin, or I can hand it to Sarah, or whoever, and you guys could have your data go, I can use Melinda's template. I don't have to understand this code, and click a few buttons and start being able to use R to create your outputs and stuff. And this is just an example. So this is a common kind of table that we would produce, right? Because we're looking at the descriptive statistics. In this case, this was looking at survival in different kinds of cancer, but you could imagine we might be looking at summary statistics for looking at our control versus our intervention, or different age groups and genders and races and so forth. And then there's some more examples here. I'm making really nice, well-formatted regression tables, and so forth. So there's a ton more things going on here, and my goal is to get this where this stuff gets put into a template so you don't have to learn all that. So we're not going to take it quite that far today, but I wanted you guys to just understand the pieces. Michael Sachs, though, again, he makes a reference here to Donald Knuth. He's got some just basic information here at the beginning on Markdown. So the good news is this is what it looks like in Markdown. And on the right is what it looks like in the web page. This down here, this is HTML code. So you don't have to learn that. Go, yay! All right. And this is LaTeX. Go, thank God I don't have to learn that. Incorporating code chunks, so it has some of the same stuff. So some of the examples that I'm showing you, I actually pulled from his website. And so this piece that I was showing you was taken right from here. So if you want to read a little bit further, you can, off of the Michael Sachs website. So in addition to just pulling the header information, I'm setting my digits equal to 2. There's some alignment things that it's doing under the hood. So it's basically saying I'm going to make my first 4 columns left justified. It makes the middle columns center justified, and then the ending columns right justified. And these are all tiny columns, so it's kind of hard to tell what it's doing, but that's what that piece is. And you don't have to do that. I could just as easily leave a lot of this stuff off and it would work fine. But I want you guys to see. So if I just take this piece, so remember how I did the head of empty cars? So if I instead in front of it put cable, which this may or may not work because I can't remember if I've loaded Knitter yet. No. Okay, so let me, it's doing this in the code, but if that doesn't work for you, you have to actually load the library first. So once you've loaded the library, this should work. Oh, it's going to go off the page. Hold on one sec. Because I want you guys to see this. Hold on. I'm going to change my appearance real fast. Make this just a little bit smaller so it'll be on the screen. Okay. So what it's actually doing when I run cable, it's creating all of the Markdown code for you. So you don't have to write these dashes and put in this stuff and then the little colon, which, by the way, these basically all say write justify everything, which I think is the default, and by default all of the row labels get left justified. So if the colon is on the left hand side, it's left justified, it's on the right, it's right justified. Anyway, so that's what it's doing. The good news is you don't have to figure that out. So the cable command here is doing that for you, and then I'm adding some additional options. This one works for HTML. Stargazer won't work for a Word document. It does work for a PDF. So for right now, just make a little note somewhere. This one only works for HTML. And I pulled this also from the Michael Sachs example, and he talks about that down here. So the Stargazer package is pretty awesome if you're doing like unadjusted and adjusted models, or if you're doing like multi-level models where they want to see the model with and without certain parameters, and you're going through and comparing model fit statistics and stuff. And the Stargazer package, if you ever want to look at it, this is just an example where we're comparing 3 different model fits. The first regression model has weight, the second regression model had horsepower, and then the third one had the engine displacement. So this is still that MT cars data set. It gives me all the coefficients, it gives me all of the model fit statistics, and it creates the little footnote for you for, you know, how many stars equal which p-value level. So it's actually kind of cool. So there's more and more of these. I'm not necessarily per se advocating for Stargazer exactly. Just know, because this functionality exists, the landscape and the stuff you guys are learning today, this will look very different in 6 months to a year from now. Just knowing how much has changed in this in the last year. I mean, Lisa and I were at a conference last year, and a lot of this didn't exist then. So there's tons and tons of this stuff coming. So this is going to become even more mainstream and even a little bit more point and click. So I want you guys to be aware of these things. So if it's really hard now, maybe wait 6-9 months and try it again. So this is where this example came from, and that's why I put it in here. So if you got this one up, let's try knitting it and see if it works, hopefully. And we'll just leave it for right now as knit HTML. So I'm going to run it and see if it does. If it doesn't work for you, let me know and I'll come take a look. So it should go through, and it looks very similar to sort of the default, because I used a lot of that to start with. Here's the output for the linear model. And then this plot here was kind of neat. So it's looking at the weight of the car, the miles per gallon, and then the size of the dots are related to the horsepower of the car. So the bigger dots, bigger horsepower, obviously probably the ones that weigh more. Here's how that cable command worked. So it kind of made that little, ugly R output for the head of this MT cars data set into a prettier table. And it's showing me the code, which is fine. Then here was the example with the Stargazer. So when that runs, you get this nicely formatted little regression model comparison table. So is this helping? Interesting? Even if you don't understand all of the code at this point, that's okay. I just want you guys to be interested enough. Like I said, even if you just put it down for 6-9 months and maybe come back, I have a feeling a lot of this stuff is going to be even more streamlined in the future. Where really when you sit down, and the other thing to be aware of too is that more, at least technical journals to start with, but it's becoming more mainstream. That Elsevier template is, that one's kind of new. I mean, that popped up here in the last month or so. So it's going to be interesting to me to see which journals are going to start kind of promoting this, and it's not just the math computer science type journals. I think more mainstream journals. I've already seen some things, not so much here, but I know with like Nature, Science, a lot of the PLOS One, the open science type journals are really pushing this. All right. We've just got a few more minutes. So if you're brave, if you want to open that CESD report, you can. The one thing, and we won't have time to go through all the pieces in here, so don't stress about that. But I wanted you to see, let me take a minute, and I'm gonna just show you some setup here. All right. So on my hard drive, and yours is going to look different depending on where you set stuff up. So if you had downloaded the files from Dropbox, basically this little report that I did on the CESD starts with 3 files. It starts with the data set, so that's cesddata.sav. It starts with the report template, which is the CESD analysis report.rmd. So the RMD is the report template. The other's the data set. And then this little file here, and there's one reference that was actually a chapter inside of a book. And the way I did this, I actually went into EndNote, manually created it, because I couldn't get it to dynamically pull. Turns out, has anybody ever cracked the nut on doing like an in-book chapter citation, like a cite while you write? Anyway, I had trouble finding, I couldn't get this one to pull in dynamically into my EndNote library. So I just opened EndNote and typed it in. I figured out what the reference formatting was and put in the information. So it's this chapter by, I think it's a man, but I'm not sure, Eatonton, who actually did some of the some initial validation and revision of the CESD. So today, if you type in the CESD and look for it on the web, you'll get the CESD-R, which I'll just show you guys real quick. So the CESD depression, it'll take you to the CESD-R website. And so you get information here. If you go to about the CESD, so I'm pulling, basically the piece that I wrote is really coming from this website. But I wanted you guys to see how to do this in R. So I actually went and found Laurie Radoff's paper, and then the second one is this one by William Eaton in 2004, and so that reference is this. So finding this reference was a little difficult. So I actually created the reference by hand in this bib format, and I'll show you really quickly what this looks like. It's just a simple text file, and so when I did this, I actually created it in EndNote, and then from inside EndNote exported it out in this format. And like I said, we won't have time to do that today, but if you're interested, I can show you how to do that. So just for right now, understand this is one single reference that I had to create manually. Otherwise, everything else that I've done, it's going to generate those references on the fly, and I'm going to show you that. So this is an in collection, and there's all the information. Okay. So these are the 3 files, basically. The only one you have to load into R is the R Markdown file. But you have to make sure that you're in whatever directory had all those files. So, so one of the first things that I'm doing when I run this analysis or run this report is it's setting that directory. So making sure I'm pointing to where all of these files are, where my data file is, where that reference file is. The other thing is I've added a piece up here in the header. So I've added, after all of this, in addition to my output, I've actually defined now a bibliography. And it turns out you can have multiples of these. So the one here that has the M file, that's the one that I manually created, so that one exists out on my hard drive. But this one, you're like, well, wait a minute, she didn't give me that file. We're going to make this one. But I still have to tell it that I'm creating this file. And so I can show you here real quick at the bottom. I'll explain how this gets created. But at the very, very end of this file, one of the last commands that I run is a command called write Bibtex. And so I just want you to see this is where that command exists. So it's actually writing the references. And the reason I put it at the very end is because I'm citing while I write, and as I'm citing, it's pulling those references and it's starting to build this file. It doesn't write it though until it gets to the very, very end. So I just want you to see where that is. And so the very, very last header is references, and that's where it stops, and then everything after that all the references get written. So that's where that piece came from. So that's the header piece. The other thing that I do at the beginning, and I'm sort of playing with the best way to do this, is I'm sort of going ahead and I'm installing all the packages that I'm using. So not installing, they're already technically installed on my hard drive. I'm loading them. So it's loading all of these packages into memory. And since we're getting a little short on time, I'll just highlight some things. The foreign package is an excellent one for being able to read files in from SPSS. Haven't tested Stata yet. If somebody has a Stata data set that you'd be interested to test, let me know. I've had mixed results with SAS. There's actually another package that with the CDC that I tested out with them called Haven. There's a Haven package that actually does a pretty good job of reading both SPSS and SAS. But for right now, I'm using foreign. The ggplot, mnorm, these are some of the plotting package, the Likert package that I mentioned before, the psych package for the psychometric analysis. I go ahead and load knitter because I'm actually going to use that cable command. Knit citations. So the knit citations package is the package that I'm using to do all of these cite while you write type things. So just so that you know what that is, and we'll ignore these options for the minute. One last thing, and this is something I haven't had a chance to show you. So just like we had our R code chunk here, you can actually have can you guys see if I write here? Is that getting too low? So just like I had this literal command here, and it just basically echoes it back to the screen. If I use a back tick followed by the letter R, then everything that follows, it's actually going to execute it. So in this one, it's just showing it to the screen. If I put the letter R after the back tick, now you're embedding code inside a line of text. So you don't have to separate it out as a separate code chunk. You can actually have code inside your sentences. And so this piece here, it starts off, it says, Center for Epidemiologic Studies was blah, blah, blah by Laurie Radoff. Then it calls this command right here. And it turns out this little command, cite p, what this is doing, so if I pull that piece out and paste it down here, inside the knit citations package, there's a command called citeP, which says create a citation inside parentheses. This is the DOI of that article by Laurie Radoff. And I know I haven't loaded knit citation, so I'm going to load that really fast. It'll take a minute to run. So it's actually going out to the web, talking to SiteRef, going, oh, okay, go find this DOI, tell me who wrote it and the year. There it goes. So it's actually generating that, and then I can embed that as I write. And so that's what all of these pieces are. This one right here is the one that I'm citing manually. But otherwise, all of these others where it says cite P, this is all cite while you write type of stuff. So if you know the DOI and you've got knit citations loaded, you can cite and go. That's what most of this stuff is. I've got some HTML things in here, some things on methods. There's one other command in here that I'm using called citation. And I think I showed this in one of the previous workshops. But that basically is citing any of the packages. So it's good form to make sure that, especially with R, because there's so many contributors, to make sure you're giving credit to people. So if you're using their package and it's not part of the base installation, that you go ahead and cite them. And the nice thing about this citation command, it gives you sort of roughly the APA format. So I could cut and paste this, and that's kind of what I do now. Or if I'm using this citations package, it creates this Bibtex on the fly and generates that. And you don't have to know what this is doing. It just builds it for you. So that's where that command is. Anyway, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff here that we could go through later, but it's it reads in the data set, it does the data summary. So like here's a command that once I have the data, it's actually going to go and look at how big this data set is. There's actually 65 subjects. And so, and I'm going to just go ahead and run this since we're basically out of time. Give it a second to run. Hopefully this will work. It worked last night. Okay. And so as it's going, in addition to the citation, so you'll notice right here where it says data summary, hypothetical data set has 65 subjects. I didn't type in the number 65. So imagine, right, you're starting a brand new study. Maybe you've got 5 subjects. You could go ahead and write the report, or the report, and go ahead and start templating out what you want your manuscripts to look like. Go away for 6, 9, 12 months, 2 years, however long it takes. Get your data, and when your data's done, you just go back and run this. This is where I want to get to. So that I can get all this stuff set up at the beginning of your study as you go away and do awesome clinical things and then come back and go, I'm ready. And I click the buttons and we write the reports. Now, it's probably never going to be quite that seamless. But that's the goal. And it's not just me. This is going on at a worldwide level. And so, so you have the ability to then start generating these things, sharing them with your colleagues. And oh, by the way, here's all of the citations. Everything's done. Now that I've actually done this, one last thing, and then I'll kick you guys out. So when I finished, in this directory, it's actually created some files. So one of the output files, there's my Word document. It's ready to go. And then this is the reference library that it created on the fly. So that file wasn't there before I ran it. Here's that file. Now, I haven't figured out, I did a little bit of reading. Like I'm very cognizant of the fact that most people are not going to learn Bibtex, so you're going to have EndNote. So it's very easy if you have EndNote. We could use your existing EndNote libraries to do this. What I haven't figured out is whether you can take this and import it into EndNote. I think you can, but it's not as seamless as I would hope. But the good news is it at least pulls all of this information for you, which is handy to have when you're creating a bibliography. If nothing else, at least now you have it in Word format. You can always cut and paste. Yeah.